Welcome to Business Talk with Megan McNulty, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of business success and reveals the strategies, insights, and stories that drive these professionals to thrive in the ever-evolving world of business. Whether you're an established entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or simply fascinated by the world of commerce, this podcast is your front row seat to learn from the best. Each episode, Megan will bring you engaging interviews with professionals from diverse industries who will share their triumphs, lessons learned, and the insights they've gained along the way.
Hi, Lauren. Thanks for being here today. How are you?
Great. Thanks so much for having me, Megan.
I'm so excited to talk to you because I love Newport Beach, and you are a Newport Beach City Councilwoman. You're also an attorney and a mother. So it's an honor to be able to ask you questions today and find out about your experience. I wanted to start with, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what motivated you to run for City Council?
Sure. I definitely never thought that I would get into politics of any kind. I'm an attorney by trade, and I had a very different path when I got out of law school that definitely had nothing to do with politics. But I got involved in local civics after starting my family and feeling the need to kind of get more involved in my community. So after serving first on the city's aviation committee, I then served on the planning commission for over 6 years, but I wanted a more proactive role in the policies and decisions that shape the city and into our future, of course, for my son's generation and generations to come.
Amazing. So you had a lot of experience already with the city and who runs it and how kind of the intricacies of how it works. So you kind of learned what everyone's working on. And I think that's great. A lot of people don't know how everything functions and who operates the city smoothly. So my next question would be, what are your top priorities or goals as a city council member?
So public safety is absolutely my number one priority. This means attracting and recruiting the best of the best and ensuring that our police officers, as well as our firefighters and lifeguards, are well compensated for the sacrifices they make. Much of my time is spent on trying to carve out protections for our residents on issues that impact quality of life, such as homelessness, the proliferation of group homes in residential neighborhoods, and impacts from the airport. And I'm just taking on all the easy issues. That's how I do it.
The hardest ones?
Yeah, exactly.
What would you say is the most pressing challenges facing our city or even Orange County?
I think it ties back into the discussion on public safety. I think it's top of mind for everyone right now. We've got open borders, issues with fentanyl and other drugs flowing across those borders. For us locally, we don't see the impacts directly like other areas do, but I know that residents are concerned about it.
Yes, I think that, I spent 8 years in downtown Los Angeles. There was a lot of homelessness, but it wasn't as noticeable or maybe I wasn't paying attention as it is now. And I do see an increase in that. So we can talk about that a little bit down the way here.
Sure.
But I'm curious about, how you work. You're going to be on city council. Your terms are 4, potentially 8 years, correct?
Right.
And so we also have other council members that you work with and, municipal departments. How do you all, what's your experience with working with the other members and the city? Do you have anything you'd like to share about that? Because it really is a team effort.
Yeah, of course. We're very fortunate in Newport that we have like-minded council members who are all passionate about the city. We also have a lot of volunteers in the community, and our residents are very involved as well and very up to speed and well-versed in all the things that are going on in our city at any given time. There are 7 of us. Even though we're like-minded, we have different agendas, different priorities. but we still have to work together to get things done. And of course, rely on our city staff to implement changes and all of the day-to-day management of all of our city affairs. But there are a lot of things that go on to run a city. Newport Beach is very well run, but that's also because we have prudent decisions that are being made by the city leaders. We just control the policies, and we can't control things outside of our city.
Do a lot of residents like come to you and say, what about this? But really they don't realize that it has nothing to do with the city and it's more of like a county issue or a state level issue? Or do you think it's the reverse way where they don't realize that they can affect change at the city level and it's not a county or state issue? Because I think people are really confused about like who controls like what. Like we have city, county, and then the state level, and which would be like the governor's office. So people are always confused, like who holds the power.
Yeah, so in the last few years, the state has passed a lot of laws relating to housing. That's the biggest struggle for us, to educate the community about things that we are forced to implement, these kind of unfunded mandates or legislation that we have no choice but to adopt and move forward with implementation of. That's definitely a challenge. And then obviously there are other state policies that we have the same responsibilities as a local jurisdiction. And so it does require some community engagement and education on those issues. But we always, especially with the housing element discussion on the RHNA, which is the housing allocations, we do our best, to work with the community and have community leaders bring that information back to their groups. But we also have challenged those assumptions, and we are doing the best that we can to digest everything,
right?
And work with the state so that we're not out of compliance.
Right, because you guys have to implement what the state passes, and then a lot of the residents think, oh no, well, we don't have to do that. You guys can like fix that. And it's like, no, we have to, this is the law now, we have to do it. So Newport Beach recently was in the news for a home invasion. And I think a lot of people in the community think that like crime rates are going up. Is this true? Or is this just and kind of like the news posting, there's always crime. We might not be paying attention, or some of the stories don't get picked up, as like it happens, but we don't know about it. Is crime going up, or is it relatively like under control and we're like a safe city? People shouldn't be alarmed. I don't even know if that's an appropriate question, but I just noticed there's a lot of like press about people getting robbed at their home invasions, like houses being robbed.
Yes, our police department is still investigating the incident that you're referring to. And so I'm not in a position to discuss the details of that, but what I can say is that was a unique scenario, and eventually we'll be able to release more details about why that is a unique scenario. Nonetheless, emotions are running high for people when any incident happens. The whole community reacts. And what I can say is I pulled the crime stats before coming to speak with you today. And in Newport Beach, I can tell you that our numbers are pretty static. And in some categories of crime, they're actually a little bit lower this year than they were last year, or at least this quarter of this year versus the first quarter of last year. And that tends to be what we see. We're not seeing big spikes for residential burglaries and thefts. Those kind of happen in patterns. Oftentimes people will feel like the numbers are rising when we're just in a pattern, in a moment of time, usually around holidays or as the weather gets warmer, we see more of those incidents for whatever reason. Again, it's an emotional thing, especially, someone your neighbor or a family member, if their home gets broken into, it feels very unsettling for everyone. Our police department does an incredible job. They do a lot of proactive policing. I can tell you, I feel confident that we are safe here. And I feel that way for myself and for my neighbors and the rest of the community, which is not to say that we're not looking at taking some very proactive measures to add some additional layers of protection for our police department. Like we're looking at a drone program, which some of our neighboring cities already have. In certain instances, if we need to make use of that, then we'll rely on our neighbors. But we're looking at adopting our own program for proactive and reactive use. And then also more camera technology, which is, really become pretty common. A number of cities have adopted these license plate reading camera technologies that connect to other systems in other cities and throughout the state or beyond, so that if an incident happens somewhere, that the plate will get flagged somewhere else and hopefully that individual gets apprehended sooner. It also allows us to connect someone in a vehicle to other incidents that have happened. So if you're going to then prosecute, you have more evidence to put behind it. And it's a lot more likely that someone or a group of individuals who have committed multiple crimes and you have evidence to show that they're going to actually do jail time versus, just one incident that may be a limited circumstance.
Yeah, no, I was just in Los Angeles and driving back to Orange County. They have a big billboard saying we will prosecute in Orange County. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. So Orange County District Attorney Todd Spitzer is responsible for those. I'm all for it. Absolutely appreciate that message. I hope that it's being received by those that it's intended for. But I think the more we get that message out into the community and beyond, the better off we are. And I think we do the same thing here in Newport. We try to make it clear that we are going to make an arrest. We are going to go after you if you come into our community to commit crimes. We've got some really interesting, fantastic success stories about our officers going out of their way, driving all the way to Northern California to apprehend someone, and the surprise that, the story about how surprised they are to open the door. And it's like, you came all the way here to come get me. Yes, we did. Because that's what we do.
Wow. Okay, good. I didn't know that. So that's good. A lot of people kind of going back to like people not necessarily understanding what the city council does. Like when it comes to schools and decisions being made with regards to kids in public schools, does city council have any power over those decisions, or can they implement like rules for the public schools, or is that completely out of the city council's scope of work?
Yeah, so I think that ties back to your earlier question. This is another area where the city council often gets questions about the schools or relating to school policies, but they're actually completely separate. So the Newport Mesa School District is independent of the city, and their school board members are responsible for the policies implemented in the public schools in Newport Beach and Costa Mesa. But that being said, we do partner with the district in a number of ways, not the least of which is safety, from bike and traffic safety to regular emergency response trainings by our police department.
Okay. Like the e-bikes that all the kids ride to school on?
Yeah, so they do have a training program and a permit program for kids who are going to ride e-bikes to school.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting. I see them all the time. There's like packs of them and they go so fast. I'm like, what is going on over here? So anyway, I mean, the e-bikes are fun, but it's just, I avoid the streets when I see all those kids on the e-bikes.
I do too.
I'm like, whoa. For those that don't know, the e-bikes can go up to what, 50 miles per hour? Am I lying? 40?
There's different classes of e-bikes. If they go above a certain mileage, they're actually not street legal without going through like the DMV type of approval. So there are other e-bikes that kids, I've been told by the kids in the carpool, I drive a morning carpool, and some of the older kids will tell me that all of the friends in their circle know how to take off the restrictors and other things, so that like that is made available commercially for one speed can actually go much faster than that.
Wow.
Not of course what a parent wants to hear.
You're like, no, and they should be wearing helmets. But
absolutely, yeah, not just wearing the helmet but making sure it's fastened correctly.
Yes. Crazy. Interesting. Okay. So city council kind of, is able to implement policy around that. Is there anything else, that city council, Newport Beach City Council, like works on for the city that you're primarily, responsible for dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, again, the city council makes the policy decisions, and that includes everything that's within the city's purview. So, we've got infrastructure run by our public works department. We have our community development department, any permitting for new home development or large community development, or just going to put in a new pool in your backyard goes through that department. We, of course, have response to homeless effort that's run by our city manager's office, HR. I mean, we have a library system that's pretty impressive, and parks, beaches, and rec. Our beaches are an amenity here, but we also are stewards of that community asset. So, as well as the harbor. There's just, I mean, I could probably talk all day about all the things that we do in the city of Newport Beach. So, we do have an incredible city staff that manages most of that on a day-to-day basis. And city council's job is to just adopt policies to put in place that guide, how we approach each of those departments and functions.
Okay. So particularly, I'd like to talk about homelessness. So I think that for me, I've noticed a huge, like I said earlier, a huge difference. I literally lived in downtown LA for 8 years. I knew all the homeless people's names, said hi to them. They never bothered me. I mean, they were just kind of there, whether that sounds bad or not, but never worried for my safety, never thought I was going to get attacked or anything. And then I've just noticed such a change in the homelessness in California in the last 8 years, even in Newport Beach. So one time I was walking between Newport and Costa Mesa, like by the water, and the homeless man did follow me. And it's like, they're very aggressive, and it's just changed dramatically what I'm used to growing up with. So I'm wondering if you could tell me, like, we have a problem. I mean, everywhere in California has a problem, not just Newport Beach. Like every city is dealing with this right now. What are the root causes of it? I know that's a huge issue that you're working on because, a lot of residents care about it as well. What do you think, like, the root causes of the homelessness in our society are, and how, or at least what have you guys been told and educated on about it?
Yeah, so you're right. It's definitely a top issue that I've been working on. I came in and spent a lot of time talking to everyone that would give me their time, neighboring cities, council members, and also staff members and nonprofit groups, everyone, throughout the whole spectrum of homeless responses to understand exactly what you're asking about so that I could figure out what we needed to do differently, if anything. It's obviously a very layered and complex issue. And I think there are competing narratives about what the quote unquote causes are. Every person's story is going to be different, but in most cases, there's a history of trauma, such as with veterans or often women who are victims of domestic violence. In other cases, people have served time in jail or prison and then exited with no support system or path to employment in place. But as we well know, mental health and addiction also play a large role in either causing, contributing, or keeping someone living on the street. The opioid crisis as well, with, again, fentanyl flowing across our borders, has very much exacerbated the problem. Another common occurrence is for people to come to this state seeking addiction treatment in our residential recovery homes, which we have a lot of here in sunny California. Right. And then what happens is they get kicked out onto the street with no support system in place again, or their insurance benefits run out, or they violate the facility's rules, and then they become homeless. And that's not necessarily the community that they're connected to, but it becomes an issue for that city to then deal with. I do want to make an important distinction between voluntary and involuntary homelessness. This is also being debated a lot in the court system. The prevailing narrative, particularly in the state of California, is that the lack of affordable housing is the primary cause of homelessness. I definitely won't argue that affordability is not an issue in the state, but there are many, many individuals who are service resistant or incapable of caring for themselves. Some simply don't want to live indoors. Others refuse shelter because they don't want to abide by the rules, or maybe too triggering, or maybe they're just untrusting of others. What I will argue, though, is that many of these vulnerable people have lost the capacity to make decisions about their own well-being. I honestly, I cannot understand advocates who defend someone's right to live on the street in the ways that we're witnessing, because really they're really not living, they're dying. The number of homeless deaths that we're seeing now is on the rise, and the ways in which they're dying, overdoses, getting hit by a car, they're dying alone in a bush or a public restroom. It's heartbreaking. We just had an audit of the state's response to homelessness and saw that they've spent $24 billion just to see the numbers of people experiencing homelessness continue to rise. So obviously the approach isn't working and it needs to change, but I think that's not likely to happen until the legal framework and discussion changes as well.
Right. So in Newport Beach, wow, it's very complex, and there doesn't seem to be a one solution fits all for this crisis. What systems are in place, particularly in Newport Beach, for homeless individuals in our community? Do we know who they are? Have we identified them?
Yes. The short answer is yes. Every community has different resources. Some are public, some are private or charitable. I can speak to what we're doing in Newport Beach. We spent about $4 million a year on efforts to support this vulnerable population. We have a full-time homeless coordinator. We have a homeless liaison team with the police department, an outreach provider who they all work together to connect individuals with the help that they need, which could be anything from healthcare benefits, enrollment, and medical attention to reuniting someone with family or placing them in temporary or permanent housing. We maintain a number of shelter beds, as well as access to the county's continuum of care to help people get placed. We have a mobile mental health provider on call in the city 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they deal with those in crisis or in need of substance use treatment. And to answer your question about who people are and whether we know who they are, unlike the state, we are tracking all of the contacts that we make as well as the outcomes so that we can assess whether our efforts are effective or not, if we need to make adjustments to our response or our program. Again, what I'll say is we have a lot of success stories, but we also have a number of individuals who refuse assistance or shelter, some week after week, but in some cases, year after year. This is where communities are seeking relief from a restrictive legal landscape that is really limiting police power, even when alternatives to living on the street have repeatedly been offered. So I know this is frustrating for those in government as well as neighboring residents.
Are there any communities or cities that are doing it right that you guys are trying to model after? Or is it Newport going to be a model potentially? I mean, a lot of the cities in California, are national treasures, right? We've got the Pacific Ocean, beach towns, and, probably our coastline is the most wealthy concentration. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but we have the largest concentration of wealth in the country on the California coastline. Are any of the cities getting it right?
Not that I've seen. I mean, I guess it depends on what your definition of right is. I think it really, the burden shouldn't fall on the cities to come up with solutions for this. I mean, we happen to have the ability, as I said, we're spending $4 million a year, but a lot of cities don't have those resources. And also being a coastal city it's a draw, who wouldn't want to be close to the ocean or the water. I think there are a lot of cities who are doing what we're doing, trying to throw as many resources as they can at it. But it's just such a systemic issue. And again, if you're unable to compel someone to get help and you're continuing to offer those services and you're continuing to spend money and resources, but you're, still having this entrenched population that's unwilling to accept help or services, and you have residents, tax-paying residents who are, wanting to see change or wanting to see these people get help. It's just very, very difficult. There are other countries that have, I think, very different cultural landscapes that might be getting it right. However, I think it's hard to compare us to other parts of the world. There are just a number of factors that are unique to this country, both legally and culturally. Freedom, of course, is paramount, and we're unwilling to compromise this, even in the case where a person clearly demonstrates an inability to care for him or herself. I will say that here locally, the mission in Tustin has a very impressive high rate of success in helping people work through their program and get back to living independently in a fairly short amount of time.
Okay.
But it's not a low barrier shelter, which typically shelters are. It's a comprehensive program and support system, but they maintain high expectations of the residents who go there and seek help.
So have you seen any other strategies for helping the homeless individuals transition into stable housing? Is there any other examples besides the Tustin mission, or?
I think that's the best one. Like I said, right now, the system, at least in Orange County, is to have outreach providers connect with people living on the street, or in some cases, in their cars or RVs, and offer them services, try to gain their trust, and try to convince them to, work their way into the system. They'll be, given a housing voucher, but then they're on a wait list for available housing that meets their needs. And that's run by the county, and there just aren't enough resources for every person, even in the circumstances where they're willing to accept. There are some cities like Anaheim that have their own housing authority, and they're actually building. But they also have a very clear directive from the Judge Carter in one of the Orange County judges that gave them a settlement in a lawsuit where they were sued by an activist or advocate, and were required to put certain measures in place. So, they've got some interesting kind of pilot programs that I think we probably need more data to see if they're working. The state also has their care court program, where they're trying to work with people who are finding themselves with a number of arrests on their record, and rather than prosecute them and penalize them with jail time, they're trying to use that and the court system to incentivize them to instead accept services and housing. But it's very limited in application to those with certain mental health diagnoses like schizophrenia or things in that category, and there are just not a lot of people who qualify for that. So what the state is finding, or what we're seeing, at least in this county so far, is there are not a lot of people taking advantage of that, even though there's a lot of resources set aside for that program. So, unfortunately, the system is very broken, and there are a lot of resources. They may just not be allocated properly. And then, of course, back to the point that I continue to make, which is there are also a lot of people who are not interested in help.
Right. They prefer to stay on the streets. I think, personally, it says a lot about our country that we have this problem. It's huge in California. It's also, you see it on the East Coast as well. It's probably one of the biggest, homelessness is probably one of the biggest issues of our time. I mean, it says like, wow, why are like people of this country, like you see, it's so visual, and you see it, anyone who's visiting here, and it's like, especially for our veterans, like, what are we doing that we have this population of people and they look like they're not taken care of or cared for with all these issues? So I don't even know if that's, politically correct the way I just said that, but I'm particularly interested in how, if you live in the United States or you live in California, how can like more citizens should care, right, about this, and like trying to help solve the problem. So how can more businesses, like nonprofits, individuals, actually support these homeless initiatives instead of just like leaving it to our government to take care of, which that, I know Newport Beach is I love that Newport Beach is like tracking everything and like the results, which I don't think everyone's doing, which I think is amazing. But, how can, in the large amount, the public sector has not helped. So how can the private sector get involved, do you think? Is there initiatives that we can take?
Yeah, those are great questions. So first, what I would say is government and policy and even cultural norms definitely play a role here. As you're describing, this is a problem that is much greater in this country than it is in other places. We have this housing first model that actually started in Finland, and they use that as a test case, to say this is what we should be doing here. But there are a lot of factors that are very different in Finland that just don't apply here. So that's the first thing. And this state of California is home to 1/3 of the country's homeless in the whole country. So again, policies are certainly playing a role. Not to say that, economic factors and again, cultural norms are not also contributing, but we've got the Ninth Circuit Court here in California, and those decisions relating to homeless issues have hamstrung every city and state in its jurisdiction. I think there's so much fear of legal challenges by activists or advocates, which then, leads to lack of enforcement for anything involving a homeless individual versus others. If you or I were openly using drugs in public, that would be a problem, but, we're turning our cheek here. So, there's issues like that, and possession of stolen property, urinating or defecating in public, et cetera, that are we're just ignoring them. So, the result is the proliferation of dangerous encampments, and we have this overwhelming feeling of lawlessness, like you mentioned, from the rest of our community. So anyway, I know, their basis is currently being challenged in the Supreme Court. That appeal of the Grants Pass versus Johnson case, and that outcome could have vast implications for cities struggling with their homeless populations. But again, these are all things that contribute to the overall systemic breakdown. We also, in this state, passed Prop 47 a few years ago, which was a ballot measure that downgraded certain crimes to misdemeanors, such as theft and drug possession. So this and prison alignment have left California, I think, an easy or attractive place to live if you're engaging in these behaviors. I do think it in a number of examples, getting private sector involved can often be the answer, because government tends to just not get it right. And I do think it has become a very big business. All of these nonprofits and organizations that develop these programs are getting paid a lot of money, but there's no accountability there. There's no tie to certain outcomes. This is something that I've been trying to focus on since I got elected and started looking at all of our efforts. But in their defense, if everything is voluntary, then there's not a whole lot you can do when you continue to offer someone services and they continue to refuse.
Right.
But to come back to your question, maybe I'll answer it this way, to say what I think is important is what people shouldn't be doing. We have a lot of well-intentioned people, sometimes organized church groups, that give out handouts, either money or food or camping supplies, to those living on the street. And in a place like Newport Beach, where we have systems in place, this actually prevents people from accepting the help, when we're continuing to offer it, and actually prolongs the street life to their detriment. We have individuals that we continue to try to help who have untreated medical conditions, who are in really bad shape, but people continue, to give them money and other handouts. It really negates our ability to get that person to take the services and the help that we're offering. There are, I think, a lot of organizations doing great work, like, the Mission in Tustin is a really good example. So I would just say I would focus on either nonprofit or church group or anything, those that are helping prevent individuals and families from becoming homeless, or are successfully getting people back on their own feet.
Yeah. Like you said, it's crazy. Like, oh, they get out of jail and then there's of course nowhere else for them to go. So they end up on the street. There's almost like there should be groups helping with that transition. Potentially the veteran community needs a transition group that helps them. Also, what about these people in the drug issue, the rehab centers, right? I've heard they just get dropped off and have nowhere to go, even though they just went through rehab. So sounds
Yeah,
like there's some holes.
some of those group homes are serving the community where they are situated, but we also find that parents and family members outside of the state will send their loved one, a young adult child to sunny California, to go get well just in desperation. It looks great on a website or it sounds good. But like I said, then, they get here and things don't go well, or they come out of the facility for one reason or another. And there's no system there. There's no support for them. And we've seen some really bad outcomes from that, unfortunately.
I think that maybe the private sector, if they work along with the local cities, could probably make a big difference. I do like that you guys are tracking this, all the different scenarios. And I know you've made a big effort to be involved and do that and clean up our city and make sure, it's safe. So I'm really impressed with the work that you guys have done thus far. I know it's not easy because everyone has different opinions about it and how the right way to do things, but we don't really seem to have, people should be open to the fact that we are trying to track it and figure out what the best solution is, and that you guys are taking action. And, I'm curious to see what the results you guys come up with over the next couple of years. Solutions are.
But yeah. I think a lot of it will depend on the Grants Pass Supreme Court decision, which should be coming here shortly.
Okay. What's the one we should be waiting for?
So Grants Pass versus Johnson, it's another court decision that builds on the Boise case methodology that essentially holds penalizing someone for being homeless as cruel and unusual punishment if there's no alternative. And again, what we've found is other courts and in other jurisdictions, the interpretation there is that you have to have a bed for every single person that's homeless, or, that even if you've offered someone a bed or shelter or housing at some point in time and they've declined help, that you then can't enforce any of your laws. So this is what's led to this lawlessness that I keep referring to, because again, all of these advocates are just suing all of these cities, and the cities have to be able to enforce basic rules of society for the good of both homeless individuals and others without this fear of having to defend legal challenges from these advocates.
Right, which is very expensive. So it's almost like paralyzing the cities from acting, which it should be addressed. I mean, wow. So it's a complex issue. I think a lot of people don't understand this. So this has been very insightful, and we're just beginning to figure out how to solve the problem. It sounds like with the homelessness, that's great what you guys are doing, and I can't wait to hear more about that. But I kind of want to transition to, Newport Beach is probably one of I think the most beautiful spots in the entire United States. It's a very special place. It's on the water. We have a harbor, and lots of people come here on a vacation. It's a travel destination. Everyone who's elected to city council has a big responsibility. Where do you see, the vision for this city? I don't know if we're globally recognized. We should be, because we're beautiful, but what's your vision for this city?
So my district is mostly Corona Del Mar, and one of the things that we haven't had a chance to talk about is this initiative I'm working on to re-energize the Corona Del Mar village, and I'm excited about that. We've seen the dying main streets all across the country, especially after the pandemic.
Yes.
I wouldn't say that we are seeing the death of any of our villages, but I'm hoping that we can use Corona Del Mar as the model to figure out what we can do, whether it's removing constraints or changing the infrastructure in ways that promotes more walkability and invites more spaces to gather, from outdoor dining to expanding on existing community events like the farmers market, that we can then duplicate that in our other villages throughout the city. And then part of that is we're looking at also expanding our trolley system, which we've run only on the peninsula for the last couple of years. We're looking to make it more of a traditional trolley like Laguna Beach has, and then use it to create connectivity between all of our amenities and villages in the city. So I'm excited about that. I think there's always a lot of fear over the idea of change, but growth is definitely necessary for vibrancy and resiliency. The world is changing more rapidly than ever before. I'm not, as you know, a big fan of some of the newer technology, like social media, but it's here. We have to plan for all the other things to come. And I think that this reliance on technology really calls for kind of doubling down and emphasizing the importance of these spaces where people can connect with one another. So that's the basis for my effort in Corona del Mar and really, citywide, because I'm hoping we can build on that from there.
I love that. So I would say, because another problem the US is having is like the amount of loneliness or like not feeling connected to a community has decreased, like, or the loneliness has increased, and like feeling connectivity to communities has decreased. So if you can create like an area where people, walk around and they know their neighbors and they're going to the local restaurant or the local market, people feel more a sense of purpose and that they're more willing to give back to the community. And I think it's so important what you guys are doing. I know that there's another group that me and you are part of called Newport Beach Foundation, which has helped with people to become more engaged in the city, which I love to learn about, like how things run, because we've really become disconnected, I think, from our neighbors and how things, run, like how things work. Like no one, it's the first time reported in like US history that people don't even know who their neighbors are, which is,
there's been all the attention paid to the blue zones. I don't know if you've read or watched any of the media on that, but people try to duplicate the blue zone concepts that will hopefully lead to living to 100 and beyond. But I think it's really less about diet and more about those types of connections, people who walk, who are connected to others in their community, whether that be, family or if they're a member of a church or just their neighbors, like you said, walking to the library or to the post office and knowing people's names and, all of those human contacts and connections are so important for I think wellness and also just vibrancy in a community.
That's great. I love it. And I love that you're working on it. And I think I've noticed that like if you travel to like, parts of Europe, they like all know each other in their coffee shop and their restaurant and then the bar. And it's like, that's changed so much in the US. So I think it's important and, bring back that like village type atmosphere. I think it'll help people and it'll make businesses, thrive and in communities and the kids growing up in those communities as well. So that's great. I am excited to get involved with that. Are there any other things you want to tell our audience about what you're working on in the city or any other issues you think you should want to bring to their attention?
Well, I don't think you want to get into the airport, but I'm actually headed to DC next week on a lobbying trip. We just learned earlier this year that Joby, which is a company that is making something that's referred to as VTOL, which is electronic vertical and takeoff and landing. They're basically electric air taxis. They will be having charging stations at one of the private terminals, one of the fixed base operators at John Wayne Airport when clearly see the terminal is finished with their construction. So that's interesting just because it's essentially like the Jetsons and it's here and it's, because of the Olympics and the World Cup coming, I think we're probably going to see some of these things that maybe would not have happened as fast come to us sooner rather than later.
When is the Olympics in the US? Soon, right?
Yeah. So all of these things are happening and we're trying to wrap our heads around it. But anyway, it's fun, makes the job interesting. To have to dig into some new ideas and concepts that you never would have thought would be here, let alone have some hand in hopefully creating the policies that create, some guidelines for these new
devices.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, so you can pick up an aircraft taxi at the airport and it's going to like airport you like in the air to your destination?
It's essentially a helicopter, but it's electric. And
okay.
At the moment, I think the capacity and weight and distance are all somewhat limited. But yeah, the concept is that you could take one of these here to LAX and then hop on your international flight or wherever you're going. And then eventually I think they would like to see door-to-door type of a connection where, it comes and picks you up and then takes you to the airport or to your next stop. So I don't know about that. But like I said, we're trying to digest it and it'll
I love it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
You guys are cutting edge. You're the first on it. So you're going back there and you guys are going to learn all about it. It's great. I get it.
Yeah, we're going to lobby. We're just wanting to make sure we have a seat at the table, like I said, to have some hand in
the policy
of it. Absolutely. And then, you mentioned the Newport Beach Foundation. Can't get off here with you today and not give the foundation a shout out, since you and I are both founding board members, that it's an organization dedicated to activating the next generation of leadership. And that we've seen tremendous engagement with young people wanting to learn more about the city and get involved. So that's been really exciting. We just have so many. I'm continually surprised at how much interest we have each time we do our Distinguished Citizen program.
I know, me too. It's like there's 25 spots and 80 people apply and it's crazy. We can't even get through everybody that wants to go through the program.
I know. It's really fantastic. I mean, I think it speaks volumes about the city and about the community. We continue to partner with the businesses and hospitality stakeholders, and they continue to invest in our community. So I think we're in good shape here in Newport Beach.
Yes, we are. We're very lucky. And I love that we have people like you that are in leadership positions that want to solve problems. And, like you said, you're going to DC next year or next week, so you can get a seat at the table on this new technology that's coming out and how it's going to be rolled out into our communities. And that's exciting stuff. It's the wave of the future. So I thank you, Lauren, for being here. And it was very insightful. Thank you so much for taking the time. I think
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I wouldn't know a lot of this info. So I'm glad that you can share it. And yeah.
Well, congratulations again on yet another endeavor. I think for as busy as I am, I don't think I could wear nearly as many hats as you do.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing to the Business Talk podcast and leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us grow and improve. Thank you for joining us today. This has been another episode of Business Talk with Megan McNulty.